Good afternoon, everyone, again, and welcome to our second class in the project, in the CSIT project module. Today, we're continuing on where we left off last day, which was we're working on your first summative assignment, which is the Interim Progress Report. Now, the Interim Progress Report is worth 5%, and it's due at the end, closer to the end of this month. You remember the actual date of the submission, guys? Don't worry, I'm trying to get it as well. So in terms of the IPR submission, it's due on Friday, the 26th of June. So you have a couple of weeks, but that doesn't mean that you're going to take it lightly. You need to get started as early as possible in order to do a good job. And remember, whatever you're doing now, it's going to go towards your final report. Another thing as well, just a note, which I'll reiterate, anything you did in the project planning module that is related to this project, just in case most of you are doing the same project, for some of you who would have probably had a different project idea, our strong recommendation is to build a learning management system. So therefore, you may want to make some changes to what you had before if you're building a learning management system. So we're picking up at this point where we're doing we've covered section 1, which is the introduction. And today, we're just reviewing briefly the background research. Now, last day when we looked at the background research, we looked at 4 sections of it. We said when you're doing your background research, you briefly introduce the importance of the background research, the role the background research plays in relation to the paper. And what the background research does is to help you to gain more idea or background information into the area of your research. So if you're developing a learning management system, what this does, it helps you to develop and to get a better understanding about learning management system, about gamification and the different features you're going to implement. So what you're going to do, you're going to select now some of the existing functionalities. So review briefly existing websites, and you'll indicate some of their more popular features. You will research into some of the functionalities, especially the core functionalities, and you'll select a few of those and you will include them in this paper here. Apart from that, you would also research beyond functionality, such as in terms of development methodology, etc. And then you will do a conclusion, and then you'll add your recommendations. So those are the 2 other areas. So these 2 sections, step 5 and step 6, are new. And these are the ones that I'll be including in today's class. All right. So I'm just going to skip now to those. So step 1, 2, 3, 4, we would have covered already. So steps 5 and 6 are what we're adding as new to this section here. So in terms of the conclusion, so just to guide you through now, so you would have covered the entire background research and you're just summarizing briefly in terms of having a conclusion and making recommendation. In terms of your conclusion, what you are simply summarizing, you're summarizing what you would have covered previously in the sections before, in steps 2, 3, and 4, particularly steps 3 and 4. So you're joining everything together, pondering and making decisions. So you're going to summarize, and you could use bullet points if you need to as well. So an example of a summary is simply reiterating the major things that you're including. Guys, just give me 1 section, one minute, please. I have someone at my front door. My apologies for that. So in terms of the conclusion, an example would be if some of the major features you discussed in the earlier section were gamification and assessment, an example would be gamification and assessments are essential, imperative, and influential as a cohesive unit in attracting users to the application. So while they are separate features, they collectively work together to increase user engagement and motivation while assessing the user's performance in the module. So in conclusion, gamification should holistically award the user for producing a correct solution and also display the student's progress on a leaderboard to encourage and stimulate competitiveness while attracting engagement and motivation by other users. While assessments determine the extent to which students demonstrate desired learning. Relying on only one method to provide information about the program will only reflect a part of the student's achievement. Therefore, a combination of assessments should be used. Now, we're going to focus on this, and I want you to understand the key learning from here. When you're trying to figure out what to put in your conclusion, when you're concluding briefly on the major points that you would have discussed, and you could add just a brief sentence or 2 on each of the major areas you would have discussed above. So just to reiterate, in your conclusion section, you're discussing briefly some of the areas you would have discussed in the previous section. So the previous section, sorry, in the same section with the previous steps. So in step 3, you would have discussed some of your advanced functionalities. And if gamification was one of them, or responsive design was one of them, or e-assessments were one of them, those are the ones you're briefly going to include a sentence. What you're including here is just briefly why it is important. Okay, so if you could simply answer the question, why is this important to your project? Why is gamification important, right? This basically is a sentence that indicates that. Why is assessments important? This is here on it. So therefore, now, if it is that when you read about assessment, when you would have did your research on assessments, you found out that there are several different ways you could assess students. For example, you could do formative assessment, you could do summative assessment. In terms of the assessment type, you could do different types. You could do objective type response, or constructive response, etc. So in your literature review, you'd have read all the different ways to assess persons. What you're simply summarizing here is that although there are many different ways, you would use a combination of assessments method rather than stick to one only. So that is simply a summary based on what you would have learned from your literature review. And the same thing here. So given that's the case, your conclusion is simply you're summarizing briefly why it's important, and if there are different approaches, state which approach you likely will be using, right? So you're not saying exactly how you're going to use it in your system, but you're just indicating the approach that you would be used. The recommendation section now is saying, how am I going to apply it to my project? So for example, here we use gamification and assessment, but we didn't exactly say how gamification would be implemented in the project. We said that gamification is to award the user for producing correct solution, and it displays the student progress on a leaderboard to encourage and stimulate competitiveness. That's the role of gamification. That is why it is important. But in the recommendation section, now you're stating how you're going to implement it in your application. So for example, you have a brief introduction. The goal of this project is to build a learning management system that can enhance the user experience while curbing some of the common challenges of existing learning management system, where failure rates of assessments are high and non-completion rates are also high. So based on literature review conducted, the following recommendations will be implemented. So this is what you're actually going to implement. So you're clearly stating here, you will be using objective testing to provide instant feedback to your learners. Objective testing is multiple choice testing, and for multiple choice, you can get feedback right away. So you're actually telling them what aspect of assessments you are implementing. Notice when you did here, you simply told them assessment is important because it demonstrates learning. In the conclusion, you talk, so that's what you spoke about in the conclusion. You also indicated that there are many different assessment methods, and you're going to use a combination of them, right? But you didn't specify exactly which one. So that's the difference with conclusion versus recommendation. Recommendation is telling you specifically which approach am I going to use, right? Each lesson will have, right? So here, just a second, this is a bit repeated. Each lesson will have a pre-test which serves as a diagnostic assessment and a post-test which serves as a summative assessment. So you're specifically saying in your application, you're adding a pre-test at the start of the lesson and a post-test at the end. And if somebody got more than 60%, if somebody got more than 80% in the pre-test, they could skip that unit because they succeeded in it, right? And if you got 60% or more in the post-test, you could also move on. But if you, right? So those are basically how you're going to implement it in your system. Self-assessments allow the learner to retake tests and learn from mistakes via feedback provided. Self-assessment is another form of testing that will not be marked. It's self-assessment, right? And so you go and you're adding more points about how you will implement these things in your project, okay? So this is another example as well, right? E-learning is a concept of making learning material accessible to all in its reach, made possible with the technological advancement of this internet age. Learning is no longer limited to the physical boundaries and time constraints. Hence, creating an application which is easy to use, offers a friendly environment, is accessible 24 hours anywhere on any device, and had a fun and fun yet competitive factor when doing quizzes and assessment performance, utilizing proper, tried and proven guiding principles and standard is most important. This was extracted from a student's project, right? So based on the literature review, the following recommendation support the development of e-learning application by incorporating user experience, responsiveness, and gamification in the project. And here, it is recommended to utilize user experience standard from Nielsen's heuristic, right, to ensure that gamification techniques are incorporated in this application by identifying when a student gets item correct and wrong, application of leaderboard to see when students score in comparison with others, and to level up to another unit when completing the last quiz. So this is how you will be implementing the different things, right? So those are examples now of your conclusion and recommendation section of your literature review. So you're implying how you're actually going to implement it in your system, okay? So that now concludes our background research. So let's review the steps of your background research. So step 1, you briefly introduce the importance of background research. Step 2, review existing learning management websites and indicate some of the most popular features of them. Then you research the major functionalities. So steps 3 and 4 are the ones that take up the most amount of your word count. You research into functionalities, especially the advanced one. And I have a guide, which if you go through the steps, you will see that I told you specifically what are the things I needed to talk about for each of these, right? Then you research beyond functionalities, and researching beyond functionalities would be like the development methodology, the choice of software tools, etc., right? And then you conclude, and then you recommend. The conclusion, as we said, is to summarize the importance of each of the things you discussed here, and I'll just briefly, and recommendation is how are you actually going to implement it in your application, right? Just briefly, like what aspect of how you're going to implement gamification in it, not from a coding perspective, but gamification has so many different approaches. Would you use like a leaderboard in your application? How are you going to implement it, etc.? And that brings us now to the conclusion of section 2. Now, the background research carries one of the heftiest marks in it. It's 20 marks for the background research. So if you do an excellent review, concise, critical review, and setting into context the project, you'll get the maximum amount of marks, okay? Now, the next section of your interim progress report is where you do a summary of your progress to date. Now, the interim report, the purpose of the interim report is simply that it's interim because it's not the final report. So it's somewhere along the way, and that's why it's called interim, but it's to allow you to comment on the progress you have made throughout the application. So with this section, recommended to use 550 to 600 words in this section. Now, remember, I want you to note, when somebody reads your report, you are marketing what you have done. Your aim is to cover as many different areas as you can to give the university confidence that you are ahead of schedule rather than behind schedule. If they are not convinced that you are ahead of schedule, then you may get a lower mark as well. So you might be doing a really good job at your background research, but you have done nothing else. You would not get a very high mark. You'll score well in background research, but in the other areas you would not. So you need to understand the importance that it's not just about, doing a good job, but you have to also progress. You need to be at a certain point so that your project will not be at risk of failing or being incomplete. So given that's the case, this is where now you give them a guide on your progress. Now I know it's very early. However, you can write your interim progress as though you have completed several of the different items. So you write it as though you've already completed some of those. Or it could be a journey. As you complete the stuff, you update your interim progress report with what you have completed. 2 different approaches, okay? Now, so in terms of the interim progress report, these are some of the areas you will need to include. The first section is your supervisory meetings. So you would be meeting with your supervisor. Now notice, Mina normally copies me on the email. The other supervisors don't. So Maria, and I think there's one other supervisor, they don't copy me on email. So Mina normally will give me an update. Mina is actually, well, Ghani would have worked with Ghani. So therefore she tries to deliver the same way Ghani would. Now, each of those email she would send you all up is part of your supervisory meetings. And when you respond, all of that is part of your supervisory meeting. Each of those emails will go as evidence that you have been meeting with your supervisor, and it will be included in your appendix. So your supervisory meetings are important. You need to show that you are meeting with your supervisor, even if there is not a lot of work to get done. If ideally right now you should be able to shine with your supervisor, because most of the stuff they're asking for are things we have already covered in the project planning module. So do not delay. You want to impress them, because the more you do, the greater the chance of getting a better mark, because they're very confident about where you are. So let's take a look. So the first part is supervisory meeting, that's 3.1. And in 3.2, you will look at work done since your, well, I wouldn't call it EPP anymore. It's called project proposal. So I'll just put the PP there, project proposal, right? So this is your work done since your project planning module. So this will include, so in the project planning module, you would have completed up to your background research. So we're moving further now. You would look at your requirements analysis. You would look at design. You would look at the practical work, which they call technical standard, which is your practical work covered to date, right? So those are the different things you look at. Now, the practical work is your software artifact. That's why it's crucial that whatever Marcus is doing, you are doing it as well, so that when you meet with them, you can show them that you have been building aspects of your application. Every week when Marcus does a task or two, you ensure that you write down the task. In my experience, many times students do not know what they built. They will go to a class, they will do all the stuff with Marcus, and at the end, if I ask them what features you have so far, they don't know, they don't remember. So you need to document, because if you don't remember, how could you tell the university what you did if you can't remember? You need to write it down. This is not to put on anyone. This is about actual challenges and questions I would have asked past students as well, and some of the issues also. So just a note. Next. So this is your structure of section 3. So please pay attention, because what we're going to do now, we're going to cover each of these 3 sections in detail, each of these sections here in detail. Can you go beyond this? Can you go beyond in design, etc.? And the answer is yes, but it's not very likely. You would have done design and you would have started building your application. You likely may not have completed testing, or in some cases, as you build, you may have tested. So you may want to include testing if you have been testing your application as well. Let's start. In terms of the summary of progress to date, right? In order to gain full marks in this section, you are required to demonstrate excellent summary of progress, substantial implementation work, which is your application. Show that you've reached far with building your application. So you need to discuss everything you have done and provide supporting evidence to support your claim. It doesn't matter if your application is not working properly. You need to market and sell yourself. Remember, you are not doing an actual demo of your application, so you don't have to worry that, well, I claimed this is finished, but it's not really. So I'm not telling you claim you have done things that you didn't do. What I'm making it clear is that don't do something and claim that you didn't do it or pretend you did not do it. You need to sell as much as you can and show as much as you can do. So you may have built something, it's a little buggy, but include that you've done it because you have done work on it. Okay. So in the first one, in terms of your summary of progress to date, an example of what you would include in this heading, under this heading would be, for this project, the student is required to submit both a written report and a software artifact. This section looks at the work done to date in the development of these 2 deliverables. Of course, you might write the word 2 with TWO, the word rather than the number, okay? So the first part of this is your supervisory meetings, right? As I indicated, they want to see that you are well planned, that you are organized, that you are prepared for your meetings as well. So my recommendation is that you frequently submit stuff to your supervisor to review. As you do, you submit. As you do, you submit. Okay? So based on that, what should you include in the body of your IPR under supervisory meeting? So just a little note here. Indicate the supervisor who is assigned to you. So you'll mention who your supervisor is. Indicate how frequently you meet. Maybe twice a week you all will share emails, or 3 times or you've had 10 emails within the 2 week or within the period, as the case may be. Indicate how you all communicate via email, Skype, etc. Demonstrate your meeting are well planned by submitting a detailed agenda before the meeting and possibly for the meeting as well. Now, if you notice, Mina I could only account for Mina because I don't know what the others are sending you all. Mina is telling you specifically what she wants. She is indirectly coaching and guiding you. Often other supervisors leave you to decide what you want to show them. She is kind of coaching and guiding and the things she's asking for are things that are related to your project as well. So as you develop these things, you can add them to your IPR in most cases, right? Or she's asking you for something you would have done already. So it's just to share back with her, okay? And all of this, by providing it at an early stage, it is showing to her that you are on the ball with her as well. And all of these, all those emails you will add to your appendix as well. Indicate some of the areas you have covered in the meeting, such as background research, ethics approval, etc. Indicate any recommendations made by your supervisor regarding your work and show what you have done to include these in your write-up. So you want to show that whatever comments your supervisor made, you have taken them on board and you've made irrelevant changes. Also, you want to show that you are well planned and organized, so include a log of all the communication with your supervisor. What is this log am I talking about? I'll show you an example of a simple log you can have to show that you are tracking your communication with your supervisor. So based on that, an example of what you could write under supervisory meetings. So what I'm doing, I'm taking these points and I'm giving you an example of how to write it. The supervisor assigned to me for this project is Minashi Mengel, whoever. We have had numerous discussions via email, and we also met via Skype on 2 occasions for our 2 supervisory meetings to date. Our discussions included the project idea, the background research done, the requirements of the project, as well as the need for ethics approval. For each meeting, an agenda was provided, which included the task that was done, what was learned, as well as the challenges encountered, and what to do next. Using the feedback provided by the supervisor, changes were made. So I'm now showing you how I'm using their feedback to make changes. So using the feedback provided by the supervisor, changes were made to, and you discuss any recommendation that they made to improve your work and what you were able to do to incorporate those. And of course now, see appendix for log of our meetings and appendix X for the log of our meetings, and maybe appendix 4 for the meeting reports for supervisory meeting 1 and 2. Right, so that's an example. So possible items in the appendix would be the log of your meeting report 1, your meeting report 2. What is this meeting log? So what is the log of your meeting? The log of your meeting is simply something like this. It has the date, and the date should go in order, starting with your earliest date of your first meeting and continuing. So on June 3rd, I sent an introductory email to the supervisor, including details of me and the project that I plan to undertake, as well as a copy of my EPP. On June 5th, the supervisor responds, discussing a bit about himself. On June 6th, I sent an agenda for our first meeting via email, along with evidence of work done to date, along with the request for meeting via Skype. All right? And you could improvise and fill in. It is like a Dear Diary entry kind of thing, but not as very detailed. It's very summarized to give so that a person is reading it could see a measure of flow, could see they could see that, okay, these are dates of your meeting, so you are meeting frequently as well. So you're giving them the encouragement that, yes, this person is properly organized, etc. Are there any questions regarding the meeting log?
Ravi, just in terms of how often you think we should meet with our supervisors?
At least once to twice, maybe twice a week, I would recommend, preferred. Twice a week via email, minimum once.
Okay. And so as gathering, okay, so we did the introduction, he replied, he actually said he preferred to use Zoom or Skype. And then, okay, I replied again. Next time I contact, what I have to do an agenda for what I plan to discuss?
Right. Now, what is an agenda? Did you guys see the email today from Mina where she sent or yesterday she sent it, I believe, with a list of bullet points of 3 things she wanted?
Yes.
Right. That is an example of a simple agenda. Right. I emailed that to you all today with a series of attachments. Now, those attachments are crucial, even if Mina is not your supervisor, because I want you to download those attachments because I sent you a sample project plan in case you may not have had one. I sent you 3 sample functional requirements to look at, because we're going to discuss functional requirements today, right? And I sent you the updated IPR notes as well. So those are the things I would have sent. So I want you to save those attachments as well. all of those are also available on the shared drive. Okay, now ideally I don't need to send it because it's on the shared drive, but the reason I'm sending it is so that you know, well, okay, this I'm using this in this class, etc. Okay. Now, your agenda is not a formal agenda, no. It's merely indicating to them, like, I'm working on these things this week, right? So these are the things I'm working on. It could be even writing them to advise them that I plan to work on this next week, etc. I'm currently working on it this week, and next week I plan to do this. All of that is part of your project planning and showing that you are well organized, etc. Now, in terms of a meeting report, you don't have to formally document it. But in case if you do, the online students, however, I think they have to submit meeting reports, and their format of their meeting report will normally be like, you have a cover page, and in the body you'll indicate progress to date, what have you done, what have you learned, challenges encountered, and what you try to do to fix it, and what you plan to do next. So if you'd like, you see these 4 points here, you can use these as the agenda for your meeting. The progress to date, what you have done, and you could list what you have done underneath, what you have learned, and challenges encountered. You briefly indicate a few problems that came up during the week, and what you plan to do next is what you're working on next for the next week or so. So you could use this as your guide, and you fill in information. So every time you're sending to them, you're sending these headings, but you have a list of bullet points of what it is you're including under each heading. And this could be an example of your agenda if you wish. Okay, next section is work done since the EPP. Now, the work done since the EPP would be other stuff you have done related to the project. So what would you include? So you have your heading for this section called 3.2 work done since EPP. And ideally, this should be project proposal. Previously, it was called extended project proposal, but now they've changed it into simply project proposal. So what work have you done since this? And so your content will be something like, this section demonstrates the work done since the development of the project proposal in the project planning module. So after this, we're going to look at requirements analysis. Now, next thing I want you to note, as I indicated before, each of these things you're doing here is going to be included again in your final report. In your final report, you will have an entire chapter dedicated to the introduction. You will have an entire chapter dedicated to background research. You will have an entire chapter dedicated to requirements analysis. So whatever work we do here in the requirements is going in your requirements analysis chapter in your final report. The only thing is, in your final report, you may refine and add a few more other stuff as well, okay? But for now, this is what I strongly recommend for you to include in your requirements analysis section. Now, in terms of the requirements analysis, this is where you list the full set of features you would be including in your application. And this would include both the core as well as the advanced features as well. So the following slides will guide you in writing your requirements chapter. Okay, so before we would have done the requirements one way. Now I'm taking you on a different step or different level of how I want you to write your requirements. So in writing your requirements now, this is what I want you to include. Step 1, identify your full list of functional requirements, which you would include in the main body of the report. Then for each one of the requirements, you're going to provide a detailed description and a rationale for the requirement. There's a way I want you to write the detailed description and the rationale, which we'll be covering in today's class. And we will convert this into an exercise for today as well, because I want you to actually write a requirement during our session today. So this will assist in determining the database tables that will be required to store data, as well as how to design your interface. And then after that, you then will write a full list of non-functional. So notice now, this section will have 3 things. The full list of requirement. For each requirement now, you'll provide a detailed description. That's for each of your functional requirement. And then you will include a list of the non-functional requirements as well. Now, in listing your requirements, you need to identify those that are core as well as those that are advanced. So notice here, this is an example. You have a number, the requirement number. So where do I get this number from? This FR1 means functional requirement 1. FR2 means functional requirement 2, etc. So FR2 is functional requirement 2. FR3 is functional requirement 3, etc. So you just keep numbering. The requirement might be create an account. This might be a core requirement, right? Who can access this, whether it's public. By the way, can you identify who are your 3 main groups of users for your application, for your learning management system? If you could share with me, who are the 3 main groups of users?
Well, I would think it would be the students, teachers, and administrators.
Correct. And if you look at Mina's email as well, she clearly identified that in today as well in her email, right? So it will be those 3 things. Just wanting to note, guys, if you don't mind, in terms of your name, I know there's someone who uses iPhone, but when I'm doing the role, I can't figure out who it is. So I had to afterwards, I had to WhatsApp each student to figure out who it is, but the person didn't confirm. Whoever's using iPhone, if you don't mind, would you mind just changing it, renaming yourself to your name? The reason is when I have to take the role, and I don't have anyone on the role named iPhone, so it will help me as well when I'm doing the role, if it's all right, please. Thank you so much. Or if you want, you could private message me in terms of who it is, and I will include it in the role, because the role has to be taken for each class as well. All right, thank you. So the 3 groups of users would be, of registered users will be students, the teacher, and the administrator. Let's talk briefly, and this part is going to be more discussion mode. Can you guys share with me the difference with what are some of the things the teacher will do versus what the student will do? Can you just list some of the things you believe that a teacher should be able to do in a learning management system versus a teacher, right? And if we could get a few different voices. So just encourage those who normally don't speak out, if you don't mind sharing with us as well, right? What you think are some of the role of a teacher in a learning management system?
I will start. I'll create a course.
No problem. So creating a course, a teacher will do that. All right, somebody add on. When you create a course, come on, somebody else, help us out. So once the course is created, a course is just the course name and maybe a description of the course. What do we need to do to the course now?
To create modules.
Right, so the creating modules, wonderful. So a course and modules could depending on how you interpret it, could be the same as well, right? But so when you're creating
like units.
Wonderful. So the
units of the module.
Wonderful. So this is what we call content management. So the broad term is content management, which will allow you to create a course and create content. And that content could be either modules, and modules could be made up of units, or it could be made up, a module could be made up of sections, and sections could be made up of individual units or something like that, depending on how you choose to do it, okay? Are you all following in terms of the difference with a course or module and a unit and the content, etc.? Because you can drill down within it. Just like how a book is made up of chapters, and each chapter has content. When you log into StudyNet and on Canvas and you go to your units, within a unit now, so a module is made up of units and a unit is made up of content or something like that, right? So those are the different breakdown or the different level of course information. And whose role to create those? The teacher. Other ideas for the teacher, guys? Come on.
Exams.
Excellent. So we'll use the term assessments, right? As much as you can as well, use the what do you call it, technical term, assessments. The reason is that when you're writing, it's good to use the technical jargon because it helps your literature review. Because when you're researching, you'll get more using the technical terms. All right. So assessment. So in terms of assessments, let's drill down a bit in terms of assessment. It means that a teacher should be able to create an assessment, right? Or create first a bank of questions, right? So they could create a bank of questions and answers. But those are just raw questions and answers. And then they could create a quiz using questions from the question bank, right? And the quiz could include degree of difficulty and all of those in terms of it. So those are some of the things that teacher can do. Help me further with a teacher. What else can a teacher do?
Feedback.
Feedback, very good. So a teacher could provide feedback on assessments as well as, you know, well, mark assignments and provide feedback. Well, same general area as well. So excellent. Any other
Excuse
thoughts?
sir.
Yes.
Does progress report fall under feedback?
Yes, a teacher could, well, yes, feedback could be in the form of progress reports as well. So feedback, just as course authoring is a broad term, and as well as assessments could be a broad term that include many things. Progress reports could also be part of feedback as well. All right. So part of your feedback is to provide progress reports on the students in terms of their performance, right? So that could be part of it, or that could be part of reporting. It all depends on where you choose to include it. Okay, so there's reporting, which could be separate, which generates report from the system, and that could be one of them too. So you have multiple places where you could potentially include it. All right, any other ideas, suggestions? Okay, anybody else regarding? Let's look at the student. What are some of the things the student should be able to do?
Well, enroll in a course.
All right, so a student should be able to enroll in a course. And before they even enroll in a course, they need to be able to come on. I need other people sharing. Guys, you've only been working on this project idea for a few months now, right? So
You need to
Students
register. You need to
Yeah.
register.
right, they could register, they could log in. Go ahead.
Enroll in a course.
Right, so okay, so you can register now, no problem. Now, one of the things you may want to do is in your site you may have multiple courses, like, you know, and if you've ever been to Udemy or Coursera or any of those websites, Khan's Academy, there are lots of courses there, and you could view courses first. So they should be able to view courses, and then they should be able to register in a course or register and enroll in a course. Good. Okay, what else a student can do when they log in?
They could select a career path.
All right. Now, in terms of selecting a career path, help me just a bit to understand as well.
In Code Academy, there are sections where at the beginning, when you register and you become a student, you select a career path, which would then now guide you to, I'm guessing the system suggests different courses that you do along that path.
No problem. So you can include a career path option then if that's the case. All right. Shania said you could search for courses as well. Very good. And yes, you can search courses also. Now, when you're registered for
Kind of recommender system.
right, so you could include a recommender system. Now, could anybody share how the recommender system might work? How you plan to use a recommender system, or how could someone use a recommender system in their project? Come on, guys. I'm talking to degree holders here. Well, soon to be. All right. Some of you already have degrees. Come on, you're much more capable in this.
If you are enrolled in a course and you've already completed, let's say PHP,
Yeah.
it may suggest that you do Java or CSS or HTML, another course that is associated along the same line. So if it's a programming course that you've chosen or a pathway in the beginning, and you did one, it may suggest the others along the same pathway.
That also
Excellent.
be
You're
like an
correct.
algorithm based. Ravi, can you implement like an algorithm based on past users when they select specific courses?
You definitely can. And here's what you're doing, right? For that aspect, right? For now, you are researching about how it works, right? So, and that is how recommender system works. It looks at, for example, students who did this course, what other courses they would have done, and recommend those to you. If you notice as well, like sometimes while you, like for example, in Amazon, when you own a product, it recommends other product, right? Even though you haven't bought the product. So when you are browsing a course, and if you go to the course detail page, so how I'm picturing it is, you have a series of courses in your menu, and you click a course, so you could search and filter by categories, etc. If you click on a course, you will go to the course detail page, where, just like an e-commerce site now, right? You go to the course detail page, and when you're on there, it will say people who have enrolled in this course also enroll in these other courses, right? So that is one way of doing it. And then the other way now is what Netflix also does. What Netflix does is when you finish watching a show, what do? At the end of the movie or the series, they recommend other series for you one time, right? So you could do it. Amazon does it in the beginning stage, and Netflix does it at the end. And you can do both. So while you're browsing a course, it recommends other courses. And also when you finish a course now and you succeeded, it recommends other courses for you to take as well, right?
Within the application, Ravi, that'll be associated with learning analytics. Isn't that so?
It will be, that's recommender system as well. It's just different ways to implement your recommender algorithm, right?
Okay.
So that's approach to it.
No, what I was saying, I'm not sure if this is a question for Marcus. Now, what is going through my mind, we have these terms, we know these are the functionalities, but there's one thing to understand, okay, this is the functionality I want to recommend a system, but what source of algorithm? Algorithm is actually a list of steps to achieve a goal. So what list of steps that I'm actually going to code in PHP to achieve that? Can you direct me to an area where we can go, so we can actually learn, because we need to understand the algorithm and then code it.
Right, and this is where your research comes in to understand those algorithms. Now, just to share, it doesn't matter what Marcus does at all. Your research is way before your programming, and you are simply researching ways in which you can implement recommender algorithm. So what you're doing is that based on your research, the algorithms, for example, are not, it doesn't have to actually be steps of coding, If you look at it, it's more high level. So if, for example, with encryption, they have diagrams illustrating the general flow of how it will work. It is not unique or specific to a language. It's just a general high level. So in terms of recommender systems now, when you research it, you learn about like collaborative filtering and different approaches used for recommender system, and you will make recommendations. So one of them. Now, please note, you might recommend X in this case, say collaborative filtering, but when Marcus does in class, he might use something totally different, but that's not an issue. You could write this here independent of what he eventually does later on, because later on now at the end, what you actually do, you'll have to justify that later on. At this stage, this is how you plan to do it based on the literature review that you've done. Okay, so it won't matter what Marcus eventually does. This role here could be done in greater detail, because remember, a lot of these features you would not really be implementing because you may not be able to complete all of them, but you need to include it because you want to show that there's complexity in your project. So my take on it is that you are writing these independent of what you actually do with Marcus, because when you actually do the application, that will account separately for where you account for what you actually did. This is how you plan to do it, right? So it should not be what you actually do.
Thanks. I just want to ask one more question. So you're saying, in a sense, for each core and advanced feature, we need to do a literature review on it?
No, you
just
can't.
the advanced
You don't have
features
the
of
amount
it?
of words to do that. You don't have the amount of words to do. So in this section, it's only 600 words. So you have to pick and choose a few of them only, right?
Okay.
Because of your word count. So that's why I suggest focus on the advanced features rather than you choose to do registration and login, right?
Okay.
You understand? You don't use the easy feature in your literature review because you only have a certain amount of words you could use. You're restricted to 600 words. And if you have that restriction, choose just a few things and choose the advanced things, not the simple things, right?
All right. Okay. So let's say I have my list of advanced functionality, and let's say I have 5. But I'm gonna do just, let's say I can only have words to do 2, so I'll just do 2, but all I listed 5.
Yes, but I would like to think you would not list 5 because 5 is not enough. You should list 10 and maybe write about 5, right? So
Okay.
you got it right, because remember, you have to give these people a sense of your application is complex. So while in the literature review or background research you'll only write about maybe 5 of them, in the requirements section, which is this section here, you are going to have all 10 of them listed. right?
Okay.
So in this section called the requirement section, you're going to put all your features here. But in the literature review, you don't have enough word count to discuss all 10 in the detail that you need. So instead, what I did was you'll choose the most advanced set of them and incorporate them in the literature review. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
Not a problem. All right. For the student, they will register on a course. They could take a quiz, right? They could, when they finish a unit, they could mark it as complete as well, each unit. But depending, you may have a test, and based on the outcome of the test, then you determine if they complete or not. You could also do in terms of like one of the gamification thing is in terms of the progression. You're not allowing user to progress to one level unless they complete the previous level. So for example, for each unit, you may do pre-test and post-test, so that if you do a pre-test on the unit and you succeed, you get 80 or more, you automatically allow them to skip the unit because they've already successful with the content. If, however, you didn't score well in the pre-test, so you do your post-test now and you scored less than 60, you're not allowed to move on to the next level because you didn't succeed, so you have to do over the unit. So those are things you could also implement as well. All of those are part of gamification features as well. All right. So, but anyway, moving back to this now, what we're saying here is that these are your list of features, functional requirements, and you list as many of them. Give each one a unique name. Now, why are we giving each one a unique number? The reason for it is going to be tied to your testing chapter, which is much later on. When you're doing a test, you have to test each functionality. So how do you know which functionality? So you're not going to just use the name of the functionality. You're going to use the number to uniquely identify it. The same way each student, each of you have a unique student number. Each functional requirement has a unique number, like FR1 is functional requirement 1, functional requirement 2, etc. Okay? All right. So these are some of them, and you indicate who can access it. Now, there are going to be some functions which are public, meaning everyone will be able to see. Can you identify a couple features that are what you will consider to be public, where every user can see? So whether you're a student or you're not registered, you haven't signed up for an account, what are some of the things you should be able to do on your system? Feedback, please.
View a course.
View a course, good. Anything else? Come on, guys. Sheldon is not the only one in class, and I'm grateful to Sheldon for keeping it alive. I don't know if I'm doing much role to keep it alive too. Come on, help me out a bit. Tell me some of the things you have in that a public user should be able to do. Anyone?
Registration and login.
Excellent. Register and login are some of the other things they should be able to do as well. Okay. All right. Okay. These are tough questions I'm asking, so I'll reduce it as well for you guys. Okay, so moving on. Guys, just a note here. The more you provide feedback, the more it's engaging, then we'll go beyond this slide. Otherwise, I don't want this to boil down to I just running through slides. These slides are not rocket science to understand. And therefore, I've minimized my role in providing them. But at the same time, we can have a more engaging class by having greater discussion as well, so that at the end, we don't really need to have to watch slide by slide as we go through, because the truth is that I don't need to babysit you as you read the slide. Let's all add value. We all have a role to play. Let's add value. Let's not make it so difficult just to get a bit of feedback and a bit of contribution as well. So in terms of the requirements, we indicated that these are some of the requirements here, but you list all of the different requirements. You indicate which ones are core, which ones are advanced. All right. Just a note, what is a core versus what is an advanced requirement? Well, a core requirement is what I would consider to be a feature that is mandatory for the system, something that is necessary. And advanced will be considered as nice to have, but must be of sufficient complexity as well. So it's nice to have, but it's considered complex, because you can have a nice to have easy feature, but you can also have a nice to have advanced feature as well. So the core features are the features that every learning management system should have. Advanced features are those that, are nice add-on kind of thing that are complex by nature, and it adds a greater level of sophistication to your solution so that your solution looks a lot more, you know, how to call it? Well, sophisticated, advanced, etc., complex. So these are some examples of core and advanced functionality: registration, login, course authoring, course registration, community and collaboration, social learning, certificates. But each of these is made up of many smaller areas as well. So for example, course authoring includes, for example, creating a course, adding units, adding contents to it as well, right? So those are some of the things that you'll have to. So registration, community collaboration, discussion groups, etc. Advanced features would include gamification, e-assessment strategy, learning analytics, progress tracking, responsive design, self-paced learning, SCORM compliance, right? So these are just some of the areas, and there are some more here as well, okay? So I've given you quite a few. What you're required to do is use these and include them in your functional requirements. Any questions? Okay. Next. Okay. I'm just taking a question as well on the. All right. Right. Okay. A cancel course. Okay. No problem. Sorry about that. All right. Continuing. So the next part is, so first you list all your functional requirements. And the next thing we're going to do now is describe each of these functional requirements in detail. So we're moving from here now. So we're into step 2. So step 1, you have like a table with all your functional requirements. Step 2, for each of these functional requirements, you're going to describe them in greater detail. Now, listen to the level of detail that I need, right? And the reason why you need to describe it in detail is as you describe the requirement in detail, you should be able to picture a screen, what the screen looks like, how much fields it have, etc. What action is taking place on the screen. And this now will feed your database design. It will feed the screen design as well, which is your user design, right? So those are some of the things. So you have to describe it in detail in order to now link it now to the database and the interface design. So in terms of it, for each requirement, you'll need to state the requirement number, describe the requirement in sufficient detail so that you would understand. For example, if you're creating an account, you should describe what does creating an account entail? What fields need to be entered? What validation checks are going to be made? Where is the data going to be stored? Because this now will inform your database design and user interface design. And lastly, you should give a rationale why you need to have this feature, right? So we look at an example. So let's look at this example, create an account. As we discuss creating an account, what I would like you to do, if it's all right, if you could just close your eyes and as I describe, see if you could picture the screen when you're creating an account. So I'll describe. So notice it has the requirement, create an account. It has the number. So based on the description now, let's imagine. In order to purchase items on the website, users must first create an account. This requires the user to enter their name, their email address, and a password and a confirmed password. I'm pausing there for a second. Can you picture the screen? You're starting with a blank. So you're starting with a blank template there. How many fields are you now seeing on your canvas? You're starting with a blank canvas. How many fields are you currently seeing on your canvas based on what I've described here? Anybody?
Well, the name, first name,
5 to
1,
7.
last name 2.
The name shall, okay, let's get somebody others to assist as well. I appreciate your willingness and I'm really grateful, but I need to get the others to move from under your thing. Come on, guys.
5 to 7 views.
What are some of those you're getting? Name.
On the dashboard?
First name,
No,
surname.
on your creator, or you're creating an account. So this is the create account screen. I want you to picture what are you seeing so far? I've only read two sentences. It says it requires the user to enter their name, their email address, a password, and the confirmation password. So depending on how you do it, it could be 4 or 5. If you split name into first name, last name, that's fine. If you just leave it as name, email address, and password, that's fine as well, right? Unconfirmed password. But are you getting those? Are you able to picture those? The reason for it is I want you to do this exercise is because you see what you write here is going to feed into your next stage when you're creating a database. It is telling me that in my users table, I need to have a name, an email address, a password, etc. Those are some of the fields you would include in your table. It goes on further to say that the username must be unique and the password will be tested to ensure it is a strong password consisting of at least 8 characters, including letters, at least 1 number, and 1 special character. What are these things telling me? Why did I include username must be unique and the password? It is telling me what validation needs to be done on the form. So it means that when the user is using this form and they click submit, it will check to ensure that nobody else has this username. And the password is a strong password. It passes the password strength test. So once this information has been validated, a record will be stored in the database and users will also receive a message that they have been registered. So it tells you now, so after you enter that, the information is validated, a record is stored in the database table called users, and they will receive a message indicating that they are registered. So after you complete and you press submit, you'll get a message back telling you you've been successfully registered, okay? Now, what is the rationale for creating an account? Registration is required in order for a user to be able to log into the system, right? So that they can make purchases, view their order history, update their profile. Are you getting a gist of what you are required to do when you're writing your requirement? This is if you want to write it in detail and do proper job, right? Let's take another example. This example is the search function. Now you may say, how could you really describe a search function? You just have a box, empty box, and you type something and it starts to search. Let's look at it carefully. So the function is general search, the number is FR3. A search bar will be available on the home page. I'm clearly indicating where I want my search to be. That will allow users to quickly enter a keyword or part of the product name or description or product category or brand. A search is then made to find products that match the keywords entered. I'm continuing now. So we're seeing a bar and it tells you when they enter these fields that it's searching. The results of the search is displayed on the search page along with a message indicating how many matching items found, example 1 to 10 of 30 items, and also allowing the user to select a particular product from the list or to search again if desired. So that's your search. The rationale is searching allows easy filtering of the products in the catalog and thereby reducing the time it will take for a user to find the desired product. And why you need it is because the faster user could get to the product, the greater the chance they could purchase it. Okay? So those are 2 of them. We are going to now do an exercise. And you're going to split into groups of 2s. Each of you will come up with choosing a functionality. So I'm going to choose a functionality for you guys, right? Is there a particular one you guys wanted to use? I'll use login. I'll start simple. All of you are familiar with logging in, right? You've logged into many systems. I want each of you now to take a few minutes and to write this for me here, right? So when you write it, I'll use this as an example here. When you write it, we are going to have a discussion and you will check to see if your system or your write-up has it as well. So kindly go ahead and start writing your login. So the function you are developing is login. Feel free to ask me questions as well.
Ravi, sorry, I was just distracted a bit. Can you just repeat what you just said?
So using this example of the functional requirement, I want you now to describe login. So if this requirement was login, describe login in detail and provide a rationale as well, right? You follow what you have to do, right, Charles?
Yeah. And how I'm typing it in the chat, or I'm typing it in a Word and then pasting it in the chat.
You just type it in, you can write it in paper, however you want to do it, and we will just discuss a few after. I'll ask you guys to share. So I'll call a few names randomly and ask you to share. Please don't leave the meeting. So guys, this brings us to the end of our class today. Next week, we will be considering the design chapter as well as the implementation chapter. And the week after that, we would look at your ethics approval as well as your project plan. And then we would have completed your interim progress report. In the interim, you have all of these documents as well, plus you have samples to work with as well. I will strongly encourage you to read a couple samples, then write yours. But understand that samples also have their shortcomings, and you need to improve and enhance rather than try to get to the same level or same standard of those as well. Do not plagiarize. They are merely there to show you examples of how it could be done. The slide also has several examples as well. Thank you very much, guys, for attending today's session. I'll see you guys again next week, Tuesday at the same time, where we continue our session. Okay? Have a good night, everybody.